Pedroon was a country known for its military might. It was home of the Order of Knights known as the Moose Riders of Pedroon. The capital was Hillfort, a majestic, large city, where the castle of the council, where the governing body of Pedroon, presided over the country. A lone wagon made its way into the city. Something fell off the wagon. The stowaway, Ulterion, had stepped off his ride, which took his 3 days to procure, but that's a story for another day. He dusted himself off and looked around. Ulterion took out the scroll and unfolded it, but not all the way, as the list was too long.
What do we have in Drown?
Ulterion scrolled through the scroll.
I need to get...
Ulterion was filled with a sense of dread as he read the item.
Moose antler shavings?
You see, the only moose antler Ulterion could use was from the mounts of the Moose Riders. He had done business with the Moose Riders before, and well, it made him less welcome to the Moose Riders.
I need to be careful.
Ulterion had scoured the city to find some Moose Riders. He was getting frustrated.
Come on. I'm in Moose Rider capital, and I can't find one single...
That's when Ulterion saw them. 2 moose, tied outside the local tavern. He smiled.
Finally, break.
Ulterion covered his mouth after shouting. He looked around to find no one looking at him.
Got to do this quickly.
Ulterion took out a small knife and slowly made his way towards the moose. He carefully got closer, and closer, and closer. He finally made it to one of the moose, and slowly he reached the knife towards the moose's antler.
Hey!
Ulterion stopped and slowly turned around. He found himself facing 2 moose riders who glared at him angrily.
What you doing with my steed there?
Ulterion smiled nervously at the 2 moose riders.
Hello, gentlemen. You see, I...
Ulterion broke into a run.
Get back here there!
You're running from the law, don't you know?
After a long chase, the 2 moose riders finally caught Ulterion and had him cornered in an alley. Ulterion pleaded.
Please, I don't mean any harm. I just need a bit of moose antler.
The moose riders kept approaching, drawing their swords as they did. Ulterion shook in fear, scrambling to think of what to do. The moose riders, as they got closer to their quarry, suddenly stopped.
Hold it, don't you know?
What is it there?
A sinister smile crossed the face of one of the moose riders.
I know this fella, eh?
Ulterion's eyes widened in fear as he recognized the moose rider. It was one he had had dealings with. This was a scarier situation than Ulterion had anticipated. The moose rider that recognized Ulterion sneered.
Do you remember me there?
Can't say that I do, friend. Sorry.
The moose rider nodded. He knew Ulterion was lying. Ulterion knew that he knew he was lying. Ulterion worried until the moose rider sheathed his sword and smiled at Ulterion.
Let's go. Get a drink, buddy.
Ulterion was very confused, but grateful.
Sure. Sounds good.
The other moose rider looked at his companion in confusion.
Antien. What you doing there, eh?
The first moose rider, Antien, looked back at his companion with a smile.
Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, don't you know, Stewart?
The second moose rider, Stewart, stared at his companion in confusion. Ulterion sat nervously at a table in an inn. Antien had gone to the bar to retrieve tankards of ale.
You thirsty there, buddy?
Ulterion was suspicious of the tankard being thrust towards him by the moose rider, but he was thirsty. He grabbed it nervously.
Thank you.
Ulterion slowly drank the ale as Antien and Stewart watched intently.
Good stuff.
Antien smiled and nodded.
Good, eh? Glad you like it.
The Moose Riders and Ulterion stared at each other in another moment of awkward silence until Ulterion broke it.
So, am I under arrest?
Antien smiled and shook his head.
Nope.
Ulterion nodded and shrugged.
Well, thanks for the ale. I'll be...
Get down there.
Ulterion slowly sat back down. Antien composed himself.
You didn't let me finish there. You're not under arrest. For now, eh?
What do I do if I want to stay not under arrest?
I'm glad you asked there. Follow me when you're done with the ale, eh?
Ulterion shrugged.
No choice.
The Moose Riders led Ulterion to a farm outside of the city, which Ulterion smelled from a mile away. He had his nose pinned.
What are we doing here?
Antien points towards some cows.
Count them cows there.
Ulterion looked at the cows and then back at Antien.
What?
Just count 'em, don't you know?
Ulterion shrugged and started counting.
1, 2, 3.
Ulterion was puzzled.
There are only 3.
Antien somberly nods.
That's the problem there. Someone's stealing livestock, don't you know?
Ulterion was taken aback.
Who could steal entire cows?
It was Thassalok. He is a...
Antien elbowed Stewart.
A highly skilled thief there.
Ulterion eyed Antien suspiciously.
Okay. What does that have to do with me?
I'm glad you asked, don't you know? You see, he's such a master criminal that we just can't seem to catch him there. So we figured an individual like yourself with certain experience could help us.
That's understandable. I have to ask what's in it for me.
Antien gave Ulterion a serious look.
Freedom.
Ulterion smiled nervously.
Fair enough.
We'll also give you the moose antler shavings there.
Antien rolled his eyes.
Yes, you can have the moose antler shavings, don't you know?
Ulterion smiled.
That sounded better.
The Moose Riders and Ulterion stood in silence.
You can get going there.
Oh, right.
Antien points.
I hear he's in a cave to the west over there. There.
Thanks. I'll be off.
Antien and Stewart watched Ulterion run off.
Why didn't you tell him the whole truth there?
Because he always lied to us, don't you know?
But what if Thassalok... You know...
Stewart draws a finger across his throat.
Whatever happens, we get rid of a problem, don't you know?
Didn't take Ulterion long to find the cave, much to his surprise. He'd made a torch before he entered. Ulterion looked around as he entered deeper into the cave. He stopped as he ran into a carcass of a cow.
Oh, God. What kind of thief would do this to a cow?
Ulterion suddenly noticed something reflect the torchlight.
What the...
Ulterion found himself looking at mounds of gold and gems and other treasures.
Wow. This is a lot of stuff for one guy to steal.
A horrifying realization came to Ulterion.
This cave doesn't belong to some thief. This is the lair of a...
Ulterion heard some giant thing come up behind him. Its landing made the torch sputter. Ulterion slowly turned around to find himself facing a giant reptilian beast with large leathery bat-like wings on its back, midnight black scales all over its body, and 4 legs ending in razor-tipped claws. The massive legs supporting a massive body with a serpentine neck that ended with a horned head, complete with a toothy maw. Yellow reptilian eyes glared down at Ulterion.
The dragon!
The dragon snarled at his guest.
Hi.
Thassalok brought his massive head down so it was level with his guest.
Well, I was roaming around and it felt like it was starting to get cold, so I ducked in here for shelter. I didn't know this was your home.
The dragon looked down at an Ulterion dubiously. Ulterion nods his head furiously.
Yep.
Thassalok nodded while still looking dubious. Thassalok grabbed Ulterion suddenly and slammed him up against a wall. Thassalok brought his face closer to his pinned quarry. Ulterion struggled, but in vain.
All right. You caught me. I was sent to stop you.
Ulterion nodded.
I figured I'd try diplomacy. It was worth a try.
Thassalok composed himself. Ulterion scrambled to think of something.
How merciful and wonderful of you, O great dragon. Right. Anyway, why do you have so much treasure?
Thassalok gave Ulterion a puzzled look.
What?
I said, why do you...
I heard you. Where did you go for the 4th question west?
Ulterion shrugged.
I was just asking because we know you don't pay for the cows you eat.
Why should I? You trying to stop me from taking them?
That's a valid point. But I still have to ask. Why the treasure trove?
Is that all you really want to know?
I mean, what do you buy?
What?
I said, what do you...
Ulterion shrugged.
You asked, so...
Thassalok snorted at Ulterion in anger. Ulterion went quiet. Ulterion nodded.
I can see why you don't need to. I mean, it's quite apparent. I would guess you don't have a profession.
Of course I do. I'm the terror of the crown.
Are you paid for it?
No. No one demands me.
That's not really a profession, then.
Thassalok gave Ulterion a glare, but then thought for a moment.
So you take the treasure from others?
They could stop me.
Well, eventually.
Thassalok glared at Ulterion with hatred and anger.
What?
What I said...
Thassalok gave Ulterion a low growl that stopped him in his tracks.
You know what? Your ears have been working this whole time, so I won't repeat myself. What I was getting at is, I know the Moose Riders have been trying to chase you out.
They certainly tried.
Isn't that a problem? Don't you fear...
Thassalok brought his massive face towards Ulterion with rage in his eyes.
Maybe fear isn't the right word. Isn't it irritating that the Moose Riders might eventually slay you?
Thassalok thought to himself as he sneered.
The thought hurts me.
Thassalok glanced at Ulterion.
Irritated.
That's a lot of people to eat. Problem?
Humans taste awful.
Really?
You'll be awful stringy, gamey. West, take the cows. Their meat is more succulent.
Well, that's another problem, isn't it?
Thassalok thought to himself.
You're right. It is a problem. It's also...
Thassalok let go of Ulterion as he sat down with a look of hopelessness on his face. Ulterion fell on a pile of treasure. Ulterion looked around at all the treasure and started furiously collecting it. Ulterion started tiptoeing away. He looked back and stopped. Thassalok sat in his existential dread. Ulterion was surprised at himself for feeling pity for this horrible beast.
Hey, Thassalok.
Thassalok gave Ulterion a dejected look.
What?
What if the Moose Riders wanted you around?
Thassalok stared at Ulterion as the guest had a big smile on his face. A few years had passed since that moment, and villagers were lining up to have accounts at Helfort's new bank. One villager was at the front of the line shouting at a clerk.
I'm telling you, I deposited 20 gold.
The clerk looked at a book.
I'm sorry, sir, but it says here that you only deposited 10 gold.
What I hear is someone trying to rip me off.
Sir, I want to help you, but I can't if you're gonna yell.
You've helped enough. I want to speak to your boss.
Sir, I don't know if you want to.
The villager glared at the clerk and talked through gritted teeth.
Boss, now.
All right.
The clerk turned around and shouted.
Boss, we have a disgruntled customer.
The villager looked scared as Thassalok came from the back. The dragon's giant head lowered so that it was in line with the villager.
Actually, I'm fine.
Thassalok smiled.
That's what I thought.
Thank you.
The villager ran off.